Welcome to Global Chats. We discuss money, we discuss people, we discuss trends, we discuss politics, we discuss religion, lifestyle, travels, everything. And this time, I'm bringing someone that you like to listen to, Patrik Jansson, a Swedish citizen who went to Tanzania for the first time in his life, and that was the first time he was traveling outside Europe. He's giving us a bit of what he experienced there, the life, the people, things to remember. Who is Patrik?
Well, I am just an ordinary guy, I'd say, in the long run. I work as a coordinator, managing in a, for non-profit organization, and I'm a global citizen, like to learn about the world, the differences between people, to learn from each other, that kind of person. And I went to Tanzania in 2021. I was there approximately 3 weeks. And I think the first thing that just touched me when I was landing there was how different it looked just geographically from any other place. But mind you, as you mentioned, before I went to Africa, I've only been to Europe. I technically been to Turkey, which was Asia, but it felt pretty European still. So I'd say that what first struck me was just the environment, how not alien it looked, like in a good way, of course. The geography, the trees, the ground, they look very, colorful in that sense. And just in general, the vibe of people, like the easiness to communicate was also a bonus. I think that if I have to say anything with the people, it was like there was no one was hiding anything from me. It was straightforward to like asking me who is this person, who am I as a person, a human being, so to say. So quite a huge country. We travel a lot.
Which places did you go to?
Well, we landed in Arusha, so we were like around the Kilimanjaro area at first, and we went to Bukoba in the Kagera region. Then we went pretty rural there, and that was quite an interesting experience to see this village life. Okay. We spent a couple of days in Mwanza. It felt a bit more international. I'd say Mwanza stood out to me mainly because it had all these. It felt like a city among mountains, because you had the Lake Victoria, but then you also had the mountains all around it, and it kind of felt like a city I'd never really seen before in that sense. Like it felt like it was one with nature in that sense. Mwanza had their own flair.
Any striking feature in Mwanza that keeps coming to your memories?
Yeah, the mountains, like the houses on the mountains, cliffs, because they have those mountains around the lake that you can see through far away. It looked a bit like Los Angeles, but with an African flair. So it always made me, sometimes short glimpses of me would be like, am I in California or am I in the US? But then of course I smelt it, I felt it, like, oh, it's Africa. But that had a very unique sense to me.
Okay.
So Iringa was interesting because I always pictured Africa as a hot place, and certainly it was. Me and my friend, we were packing just normal t-shirts and shorts and all that stuff. But as soon as we reached Iringa, it got really cold, like not as cold as it could get in my home country. So it's not like it was shocking in that sense. But to be in Africa and all of a sudden you have 14 degrees coming up to you, I had to go and buy a warmer sweater because that wouldn't cut it. So Iringa was certainly, it had a very European flair in that sense. Mm-hmm. According to my guide, there's a lot of Europeans who live there in Tanzania because of the cooler climate. So that even though it might be in the middle of the summer, there's still a bit of cold. Yeah, I went to Dodoma after that. Dodoma was it felt very fresh in that sense that it felt like all the buildings were very, very new. And but there was not much to do there. Like they had the parliament, they had the big university and the hospital, and they had a huge skyscraper which had a bar on top of it. But there was not much activity there, as I saw in all the other cities I mentioned. Of course, I was with a friend there.
When exactly was that? In which months of the year?
That was probably in August or September, something like that.
Yeah, during those times you don't expect much activity in Dodoma because by that time there's no parliament in Dodoma. So activities are a bit slower and lower and fewer. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was like, but of course, the friend I was staying with had her own vineyard, for example, that produced wine. So it was the first time I tasted African wine. I didn't even know they made it.
You mean the Dodoma wine?
The Dodoma wine, precisely.
Okay.
So we went to see the vineyard, the orchard, and of course the geography around the Dodoma was quite fascinating. It was like huge plains with a couple of rocks here and there. Looked a bit like if you ever seen those old cartoons of, they have those huge mountains. It's quite fascinating. Yeah, from Dodoma we eventually went on a very long bus ride to Dar es Salaam.
Okay.
And Dar es Salaam, I didn't get to wander out about it too much because it's so big. We mostly traveled it through car, but it was certainly one of the biggest cities I've ever been to in my life. I've been to London, which is probably bigger in that sense, but it felt bigger than London because the urban sprawl was from here to there, you know, and you could get lost very easily. We were driving around the city, and I felt like we were just driving around the same buildings over and over again.
Because they look alike.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, towards the harbor front, we saw all the skyscrapers. And skyscrapers is not something we generally have a lot in Europe. And having so many at the same spot was new to me as well. Don't think I've ever been anywhere except maybe London where they have skyscrapers of that. In Stockholm, for example, we have no skyscrapers. We have tall buildings, but we don't have skyscrapers. Okay. So that was also quite interesting to see. It felt very American almost. And from Dar es Salaam, we went on a boat trip to Zanzibar. And Zanzibar felt very touristy, very European as well, because I never seen as many white people in my entire trip as I saw there.
You mean your entire trip to Tanzania?
Yeah, in the entire trip to Tanzania. Whites were quite fairly common, and English was quite easy to talk. Everyone knew it. They were all used to tourists. They even spoke more languages there than just English, because they get tourists from Germany, Spain, Italy. They will speak their languages to get to know them a bit. But as a city, of course, me, a fan of history, Zanzibar was just filled with things to see. Like old mosques, bathhouses from the Sultan area, you know, colonial buildings, Freddie Mercury's home where he was born. It is a tiny island, but there's so much to experience and see. So Zanzibar is definitely on my return to if I would ever go back.
I know you love history. Mm-hmm. You must have seen more historical sites in Tanzania than Zanzibar and just Bukoba and Iringa.
Well, of course, we went to the old colonial building for the German when the Germans controlled it, Bagamoyo. So that was the capital before they made it to Dar es Salaam, and that city, of course, was important before the Germans came as well. But when it comes to like indigenous history, when we were in Iringa, we visited the place where the Maji rebellion was active. When the Germans tried to colonize Tanganyika at the time, these parts were like actively fighting back to stop them. So you could see the items that they used in the local village life, the chief, how they fought back, and even the skull of the rebel leader. I assume you would remember his name. Yeah, exactly. So the actual skull that was his, which you're not allowed to take photos of. So when you're there, make sure to memorize it in your brain. So they had those areas as well. So it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Just for the sake of curiosity, in all the places that you visited and the people you met, what particular thing in each place that you think you can remember about that place? Specific things that can make you recall the moment and the people in that particular place.
Yes, Arusha, it has to be Mount Kilimanjaro. Strikes me, this is almost the first thing I saw when I came off the airport. it's just such a magnificent piece of natural wonder. Bukoba, I would say, like just the rural feel of it, that, you know, there was no asphalt on the road, it was, you know, sand roads, and people were going by mainly by walking, or they had those little small bikes that they would ride. Of course, being close to Lake Victoria as well.
Did you happen to ride one of those bikes?
Yeah, you did.
Picky.
Yeah, twice actually. And the first time I was holding on quite tightly. But the second time I felt like it's quite easy to sit on actually. Okay. It was quite enjoying. Mm-hmm. And of course, with the village I went to, Rwanda village, it was quite, you know, I already talked in depth about how unique it looked, like going back in time. Yeah. I remember how they were cutting the meat on like pieces of leaves right in front of me, and they were cooking it in front of me, you know, that kind of stuff. Okay. One side has to be the mountainsides along with the lake, you know, this California kind of feeling, but with an African flair. Iringa, the cold, I had to say, the freezing cold.
It's surprising for the Swedes to be talking about the cold in Tanzania.
Yeah, when you're coming from Mwanza where it was like 30 degrees, and then you go to Iringa where it's 14, you know, it's that contrast, you know. So, yeah. Dodoma has to be the open plains around the city, and of course the emptiness of it a bit. But as you said, you know, it's a capital, so if it's during the busy season, it will probably be a bit more activity. Yes. Salaam, skyscrapers, and just the sheer size of it, and so many different types of cars and buildings and smells and tastes. Zanzibar, of course. The stone town, you know, the historical aspect of it. It looks like a Swahili town, a traditional town. Okay. You can get back in time and just imagine it 200 years ago. I always see the Bagamoyo as a bit like Zanzibar in that sense that it had that kind of historical flair to it. But of course, what I remember mostly from Bagamoyo was, of course, the first time in my life that I saw the Indian Ocean. Because, mind you, I had never been to the Indian Ocean before, so I made doubly sure to like touch the water, to see it, to sink it in, and at that time it was low tide, so you could walk pretty far out. So I'd say I walked on the Indian Ocean, and I like to make that known to people.
Did what you knew before match with what you really saw and experienced?
Because I knew the facts that you can research yourself, but I didn't know, of course, the feel and the authenticity of it. You know, to actually talk and experience things that you never talked to or experienced in your life before. I don't think I've gotten remotely close to those kind of things, because you can read a lot about things. You can have a lot of assumptions and a lot of predetermined ideas about things, but when you're actually there yourself, you don't really realize how real it can be, you know. And I think that the reality of it was what really hit me a lot, that, you know, these people are human beings like me, but they live very different lives than me. Of course, I try to live my life as easygoing as I can, but that was mostly interested in me, how people were quick to know you, and they were quick to befriend you. And that is quite different from where I come from, because here it can take a long time to get to know someone on that level, because it's almost like you have to have a checklist of things you have to do before you know someone. But there it was more like, let me know you now, because you're here in front of me. Let me know who this person is, who is this individual I'm talking to. And that stays with me a lot, and you can't really research that in any sense. You can only experience it.
You have to experience it physically. Yeah. Any friends there?
We were in Mwanza. We went to the national park there called Sanane, yeah. And we befriended the guy there. He was very good English speaker, and he's been into the US and those things. So we exchanged phone numbers and communications.
Does he call you?
No. But we still, you know, write occasionally.
Okay.
And of course, I met a guy called Simon, a nice person. He lived in Salaam, but he was with us for some parts of in the Zanzibar trip, and he took us to Bagamoyo.
Okay.
So he might have quite a good connection too. Of course, my guide Mary, who was with me the entire trip. Without her, we would not be able to travel so far and like reach as many places. And I intend to take her to my home country as well. So, you know, as I said, it's easy to form connections there. So there's a lot of other people I met that I would like to see again. So too many to name here.
From what you're telling me, it looks like you're planning another trip to Tanzania.
Yes.
How soon?
Sooner than later.
Very nice. So happy to have you, Patrik.
Thank you so much.